guys, I'm back with Lab6, which is a GPS slash geocaching app. Basically, the geocaching app runs on for a section of York University um, on any mobile device through the web browser. Again, we've got three components: the HTML, the JavaScript, and the CSS components to this lab, and we'll go through that as well as maybe some of the struggles I've encountered through the lab. So first off, we'll start with the HTML. Um, Similar to the last couple labs, it's pretty standard with importing the JavaScript and importing the CSS. Then we've got our various different headings, different divs, just to help divide up and set IDs to certain components. So some of these important components would be div ID target, div ID me. So these are basically the targets where you want to go on campus, and me being where you currently are. Next step is toggle GPS, and this sort of starts the GPS. Um, all the different functions and initializing that has to go on within the JavaScript. Um, Latitude and longitude. So that's again um, the degree coordinates of where you are. So latitude is, I'd like to think of it as the y-axis, so above or below the equator, and longitude is east-west of Greenwich. And now is just an update or two to show that the data is coming in live and it isn't cached somewhere or something. Next up, we have another button here, which is next location, and again, this is a geocaching app. So what this does is it cycles through a set list of locations of items to be found. So that's that, and then just here I've got a couple debug items or divs just to help me with debugging throughout the lab. Again, I've was running into different problems here and there. So having these debug divs definitely helps with troubleshooting. So we'll move on to CSS. So the CSS again is pretty simple. Position relative to the map block. Me and target have the same thing, and position is absolute, and that is actually relative to the block that it was placed in, the block of body. Then we'll go on to the GPS, so this is where all the juicy stuff is. So first we have defined quite a few variables here actually, and we'll start off with GPS one long and GPS one lat and GPS two long and GPS two lat. So this is basically the like 2 points on the map um, that are far apart, and we use this when we're interpolating. So one of the struggles or one of the challenges with this lab was having to take GPS coordinates and sort of translating that and creating a relative scale to that section of land. So by having 2 points that are far apart, we're able to create, you know, have a pretty good spread of distance to create those units. And to interpolate, we use these degree values for longitude and latitude, as well as the pixel value. So we're corresponding the degree values to a pixel value in the map, and you can see that here. So U1 and U2 is basically corresponding to GPS 1 long and GPS 2 long. So physically on the map in terms of pixels, negative 79.510384 degrees is represented by an x value of 40. And similarly with negative 79.500160, that's represented with a pixel value of 993. And again, with the longitude or y values, it's 43 degrees corresponds to 15 pixels, and 43.772346 corresponds to 469 pixels. One of the key things to note is with pixels, they're not actually following the conventional Cartesian plane coordinate system, where you've got your 0 and 0 at the center, positive x is to the right, negative x is to the left, positive y is up, and negative y is below. So in I guess the web interface, the its conventional system is having 0, 0 the top left of whatever image. So your positive x is still right, but your positive y is now down instead of up. So that was one of the things that threw me off in creating the lab. Next up, we just have a couple IDs which we set to null, and our ideal that we set to null. Then first time, just to see if this is the first time that the function or that the JavaScript is being launched. And now we've got 3 of our geocached JavaScript objects. So these are not JSON objects. JSON objects conventionally have double quotation marks around the object's property. So there aren't any here. So if we wanted to, we'll see later on, if we want to access long of location 1, it would be lock1.long, and we would get that negative 79.5, etc. So these are the 3 different geocache locations on campus, and we can see how that affects or what that results in on later on. Next up, we've got 3 different caches, or 3 different arrays within caches. So this is when we load these JavaScript objects into the indices of this array, which is a 3 object long array. So we'll move on to, I guess, the start of this function. So this function starts when the toggle GPS button is clicked. So on click will run toggle GPS, and basically this kind of just helps or starts the GPS function. We've got our navigator, geolocation, watch position, and this is what starts it all. And it'll accept show position, and it'll enable high accuracy. There's also a stop position, which will stop stuff. If not, though, it continues. If there is no GPS available, it'll also open up a pop-up, but this day and age, this will probably not really happen unless you have a really old device. Most devices, if they don't have GPS, they'll have Wi-Fi, and this also works through Wi-Fi geolocationing, which kind of pings different network towers to have an approximate, get an approximate location for you. Next up is just handle error. So if there is an error pushed out from your GPS functions, then it'll result in here. And these are the various different types of errors that'll happen. Then we've got our show position function. So up here, we call show position and we pass it something called an object called position, and this is basically where we're physically pulling the coordinates for each direction. So latitude, the div we created earlier, which is right here, that's going to get updated with the actual latitude value. So within position object, we've got the coordinate property and latitude argument or value there. So again, with longitude, it's the same deal. And yeah, this is just again, setting the now property, which I said the now div, which I said takes it just updates and makes sure that with a timestamp makes sure that the GPS is working and not using old data. So after we're done with show position, then we can move on to our interpolate function. So this is where we're doing that interpolation I was talking about earlier, where we're taking our our degree values of longitude and latitude, and we're scaling it to pixel values on the map. And I'm not going to go through it. It's all pretty self-explanatory right here, and you can see it. So I had to create two functions, one for longitude and one for latitude, and I just found this to work the best. And earlier in the code, we'll be calling this stuff to get the actual values. So then we'll move up to show position. So yeah, we'll move back to show position. So here we left off with it taking the latitude and longitude stuff, and then actually down here, this is where we're setting, we're basically setting our position on the map relative to the different buildings and stuff. So it's found the latitude and longitude, and down here it'll do that correlation from latitude and longitude to pixels of our in terms of location, and then it'll post that down onto just below the map. So one thing here, I have a debug div, and I mentioned that was just for troubleshooting. We can comment that out because it's not going to be used. And then here, yeah, so this is pulling the values from like the interpolated values. And then over here, we're actually going to be doing similar to the last slide. We're going to be setting the CSS style of these different positions to change depending on our location. So here we're getting our locations on the map in terms of pixel values U and V, and we're setting the style of that div me. So we're setting the style left to current long, which is the longitude x value, and style.top to current lat, which is the latitude or y value. So that'll scale on the map to where we are, and it'll sort of be approximate. And yeah, so that's pretty much all of the coding for this lab. And we can just test the HTML and see for functionality. Right now I'm not on campus, so we won't be able to see that it's populating on, showing our position on campus, but it'll be still good enough to show other aspects. So this is the app, and again, these are our markers. So when I hit next location, you'll see this cycling around. And if I hit start GPS, it'll get latitude and longitude, but it just won't show on the map because we're not on campus. But this happens frequently, and I think it's a JavaScript error. Anyway, we'll go with next location. So this one here, so I actually picked a life science building, and you can see that it's a little below it. We'll go on to the next one, which is the basketball court. And again, I picked right the center when I was getting the coordinates. So I think in how the image is scaling and the coordinates are scaling, there's something wrong with the interpolation. Well, not wrong, but it's just not doing it as accurately. And the reason for that is because of how the Earth is shaped. It is a sphere, but we're trying to pull it into project it onto a 2D space. So even though the curvature is small, like really small on this section of map, we still have that issue. And again, we'll go to our last location, which is the Starbucks out in Accolades, I think, or Center of Film and Art. Again, it's a little off, but you can see that it does access those JavaScript objects or the cache array, and it'll cycle through the properties and update the location. based on those properties, again through the CSS style functions, which you can change in JavaScript. So that's the lab. Thanks for watching.